Okay, we're to the Gemara on Kuf Chaf Amid Beis. We saw the Shita of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Machlokes Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Rabbi Akiva as to exactly when the Zman of the current Pesach is over. Rabbi Akiva said you have the whole evening to Bisman Chipazon, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said you have till Chatzos. Very chometic a carbon only till Chatzos. And we said at Chatzos it becomes nicer. So we said that Stam Mishnah is like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. The Mishnah then said that Pigel Nicer, right, they all become Pigel and Nicer, they Matama Yadayim, they Matama your hands. The question is why? So we're up to Pigel Nicer, Matamas Yadayim, 2 lines from the bottom on Kuf Chaf Amid Beis. Rav Huna Rav Chisda, Chadam Mishum Chajde Kahuna. One is of the opinion because of we're suspicious of the Kahanim, and we'll see what that means. The Chadam Mishum Atzilei Kahuna. And the other one says because of the lazy Kahanim, and we'll see in a second what that means. Chadam Kizayis, the Chadam Kibeitza. One says the share is Kizayis, and the other one says the share is a Beitza. Now, on Kuf Chaf Aleph Amid Aleph, Chad Tani Apigel, Chad Tani Anaiser. One is saying the share is on not the share, the Chashide Kahuna, and one is saying the reason for Pigel. Pigel, what are you worried about in Pigel? That the Kayin, he has a machshava b'shasti avoida that will passel the carbon. So let's say someone shows up and he has something against the guy. So he can go ahead for all intents and purposes and mess the person up. So therefore, what do we say? Well, if he's going to do it, his hands are going to become tamei. It's fascinating to me. The Kayin will be such a guy who's willing to go ahead and passel the carbon, right? Conversely, on the other hand, he will go ahead and be worried about become tummy v'tummy v'tayra, and be worried about that. So it's interesting that he. So that's the reason for chashide. And what about atzilei? That's nicer. When does something become nicer? Something becomes nicer when what? When you leave it over. So he's lazy. So be'emes Rav Chisda and Rav Huna are not arguing. Each one is saying a svara in either pigel and or the nicer. So v'chad tani apigel, v'chad tani anaiser, mandi tani apigel mishum chashide kahuna, umandi tani anaiser mishum atzilei kahuna. Chadam kizayis, v'chadam kibeitza. One says the share of kizayis, and one says the share of a beitza. Mandam kizayis kisura. V'chol tarakula, the share of achila is what? The share is a kizayis. Umandi kibeitza kitumasai. One says beitza is the share of its tumah. Because we know that Tumas Eichlin, one of the things we learned in Masechta, that Tumas Eichlin, the share is what? Is a Beitza. So each one, in the first case, is explaining why by Pigel, the time of Chashide Kahuna, and by Noisa, the time of Atzile Kahuna, and one says the share holds, why does one share? They argue talking the share. What's the criteria for the share? What creates each one? One says we look at the Isser, and the other one says we look at what? At Tumah, at the share of Tumah. Says the next Mishnah. Now we know there's 2 korbanos that you bring. There's a carbon you bring called the carbon Pesach, and accompanying the carbon Pesach is chagigas yud dalit. That's a carbon you eat to ensure that the carbon Pesach is eaten ala sova while you're satiated, right? So therefore, you're going to go ahead and bring that as well. You make a bracha on the carbon Pesach lechol es Pesach. You make a bracha on the chagiga lechol es hazevach. Good. Now the question is, can one bracha pat to the other? It's machlokes between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. Let's see. Beirach birchas Pesach, poter eshel zevach. You make a bracha on the Pesach, you're patting eshel zevach. Beirach eshel zevach, like poter eshel zevach. Says Rabbi Shmuel. Says Rabbi Shmuel that the bracha of the current Pesach can in fact pat to the zevach, but the pot on the zevach cannot. The bracha on the zevach on the chagiga cannot pat to the bracha on the current Pesach. However, they're individually, neither can go ahead and do the job. Now, as a means of understanding the next Gemara, we know by now that there's 4 avodas of dam in every single carbon. There's a shchita, there's a kabbalah, there's a halacha, and there's a zurika. However, by the karbanis, 3 karbanis, the carbon Pesach, Bechar, and Maisa Behema, there's a Maisa of shvicha. There's a ma'aser of pouring, not srika. So question, Let's say in a regular carbon, instead of doing zrika, you do shvicha, you do pouring, right? Conversely, let's say vice versa. Says the Gemara, Kishetim Soloima Lediv Rabbi Yishmael, Zrika B'chal Shvicha. If your carbon Pesach, which requires shvicha, if the carbon Pesach, which requires shvicha, the carbon Pesach requires shvicha, it can pater it, so it must be that zrika is less than shvicha, because my carbon Pesach, which equates with the act of pouring, goes ahead and paters the zrika, which is an act of spritzing. Then Rabbi Yishmael says, hey, my carbon Pesach can pater my zevach, so you see shvicha is more inclusive than what? Than zrika. However, however, you cannot pata your carbon Pesach with an act of zrika. So obviously, shvicha is not considered b'chlal zrika. Shvicha is much more of a direct. With zrika, you're farther away, and therefore doesn't pata. Okay, Rabbi Kiva. Now, Rabbi Kiva, loy shvicha b'chal zrika, loy zrika b'chal shvicha. Since the bracha does not go ahead and pata each other, so neither the shvicha or the zrika are synonymous. Rabbi Simloi ikloi le pidyon haben. Rabbi Simloi, he went ahead and he came to a pidyon haben. Boy mine, they asked the following question. Now pshita al pidyon haben ashek l'sham yisod sivan al pidyon haben avi haben mevarach. It's the father that goes ahead of the child that makes the bracha pidyon haben. Baruch shechiyanu v'kimen v'gran l'zman hazeh kayim mevarach avi mevarach. Who is the bracha of shechiyanu? Right, you could just say mevarach kayim mevarach. Why? The kamatu hanaliyade is getting a few bucks, right? He's getting 5 slayim, so he makes a bracha shechiyanu. When you get, when someone dies, they brachas. Shechiyanu. Here's a shayla from hopefully you know. It's not from that. Avi ben mevarach. What's the father of the ben? That's mevarach, the ka'avid mitzvah. And lehavi biyadei, Rav Simlai did not know. Asa shol beis midrash. They came to beis medrash, and Amru later said, Avi ben mevarach. It's the father of the ben that makes the bracha. Both shtayim makes both brachas. He makes the apidyon ben, and he makes the bracha out of shechiyanu. V'ilchas Avi ben mevarach shtayim. Very cryptic Gemara 10, right? The whole time. So I was thinking of a reason, perhaps. Began Masech this Pesachim, and it's all about Pesach. The Makav Patish was the Chor, Makas Bechiris. So Menela, we end the Masech and begin the Masech, right, with this Indian, the Indian word of Pidyon Haben. Now we're making the Siyam, Lil Nishmas, 2 inyanim, two things, and one is beyond. It's just beyond. I found last year, January 5th, 2020, I found it written that my name is Meir ben Shloima, and I'm in the ghetto, and I'm learning Pesachim, and I'm up to Daf Mem Balad. Reverse, it's Dam. If I don't know if I'll finish the Masechta, anyone find this note? Please finish Le'ilun Nishmas. Please finish the Masech Nishmas, a Holocaust, not survivor, a Holocaust victim named Meir ben Shloima. In addition, this evening is the yahrzeit of my Chava Toiv, Rav Matisyo ben Rav Alexander Zushimeya Bloom, who was nifter a year ago. And I just to amazing. Those who were there that evening was part of it. It was an amazing evening. Rav Bloom had COVID. He didn't know he had COVID. COVID just came out at the time. He was running 103 fever, and he called me up and he said, Chief. He called me Chief, like he was a big get smart guy, Chief, right? Chief. The Chief. He said, I taught today. I said, I think nothing less of you. And but he goes, but I'm feeling pretty sick. I said, okay, listen, I think that fantastic what you did. Anyway, he said to me, he said, you're on Zoom now. Where's your Daf Yomi? I said, actually, I'm saying the Daf Yomi on Zoom. So he said, would you, what's your Zoom site? And I gave him the number. I gave him the number. That night it was Daf, I think it was Daf Yud Ches, if I remember correctly, in Masechta Shabbos. And the Gemara had a very, very interesting shaila. The Gemara said, we know that there's a dinner of Shvisas Behemtoi. Right? The Gemara had a shaila is the dinner Shvisas Kalim. And it's machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel whether your kalim have to go ahead and rest or not. So he said, asked the question. The Gemara said, according to Beis Shammai, if there's a din of shvisas, because the fermentation cycle of beer, it takes 8 days, and therefore it will have worked on Shabbos. So therefore you can't have enough of something that was on Shabbos, right? So how can you ever drink beer? So the Gemara gives a din that tonight that he's mafkarit that day. The Gemara gives a against the Torah. Anyway, l'chala pachis. I'm about to hang up and go off the site, and all of a sudden I hear, Chief. I said, Marcus, you there? He goes, yeah. He goes, I have to tell you, Rav David Cohen has a very interesting insight about beer. One of the minhagim we know for those of a ben zachar that you serve beer by a shalom zachar. What's the source of serving beer by a shalom zachar? So because it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch, one of the reasons for a shalom zachar is to ensure that a Shabbos passes in the child's life. So as it comes to Shabbos, we go ahead and celebrate. It's going to have a Shabbos. The nail of beer also, since it's 8 days, also has to have a Shabbos in its life. And the nail of what? We go ahead and we have beer by Shalom Zachar. The Gemara in Daf Lamed Aleph and Bracha says that a person who takes leave from his friend should always leave mitoich bar halacha. That's the last time I spoke to my chavet. Hashem was a kiss from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Came on, Yankel remembers he came on, and that's the last thing I heard from him. The last time I spoke to him, he was nifted at the age of 62 or 63, and he's in the Bezna Shamaila, and I speak from time to time when he has these questions that, have you looked at Haradas questions? Like if you get 2 out of 30, it's good. So if I was masking, I said, right now, he's in Shemayim, right? By the Kisi HaKavod, because only the Rebbeinu Shalom could possibly answer those questions. Okay, so we're saying Leila Nishmas, the Hajj and Leila Nishmas, Meir ben Shloima, and Matisyo ben Alexandra Zusha Meir. Hajj Alecha Arvei Pesachim, Mestiklam Mesech Pesachim, Hajj Alecha Arvei Pesachim, Mestiklam Mesech Pesachim, Hajj Alecha Arvei Pesachim, Mestiklam Mesech Pesachim. Here is Hajj Alecha Mesech Pesachim, Hajj Chalon, Daita Chalon Mesech Pesachim, Daita Chalon. When it's Nashim Menach Mesech Pesachim, like it's Nashim Minan, Lo Bom Medem Lo Medasi. Hajj Alecha Mesech Pesachim, Hajj Chalon, Daita Chalon Mesech Pesachim, Daita Chalon. When it's Nashim Menach Mesech Pesachim, like it's Nashim Minan, Lo Bom Medem Lo Medasi. Hajj Alecha Mesech Pesachim, Hajj Chalon, Daita Chalon Mesech Pesachim, Daita Chalon. When it's Nashim Menach Mesech Pesachim, like it's Nashim Minan, Lo Bom Medem Lo Medasi. You tell Fenecha Adnai Eloheinu V'Elei Avosenu. Sheikh Teresechim Mesenu B'Lam Azel V'Tiyin Man Loyim Haba. Chanina Bar Papa, Rami Bar Papa, Nachman Papa, Choy Bar Papa, Abba Mori Bar Papa, Rafam Bar Papa, Rochish Bar Papa, Surcha Bar Papa, Adam Bar Papa, Daru Bar Papa. Harav No Adonai Eloheinu V'Tivit Teresecha B'Finu B'Fiyas Amcha Beis Yisrael. Ni Kulonu Anachnu V'Tzatzenu V'Tzatzayim Amcha Beis Yisrael. Kulonu Dei Shemecha V'Lei Teresecha. V'Oy Bay Tichakmeni Mitzusecha Ki Elolim Hili. Hili B'Tamim B'Chukecha L'man Lo Yavash. V'Olim Meshcha B'Kudecha Kivam Chisani Baruch Ator Adonai Lamenu Kecha. Amen. 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 Celebed. Moedim Menachem Fenecha Adonai Eloheinu V'Lei Avosenu. Shesamta Chakenim Yoshe Beis Hamedrash Shesamta Chakenim Yoshe Pranas. Shanu Mashkim V'Hem Mashkim. Anu Mashkim L'Divitari V'Hem Mashkim L'Dvarim B'Telem. Anu Amelim V'Hem Amelim. Anu Amelim Mekabim Sachar V'Hem Amelim V'Einu Mekabim Sachar. Anu Ratzim V'Hem Ratzim. Anu Ratzim L'Chayolim Abba V'Hem Ratzim L'Shacha Shnema V'Ata Elohim Teridem L'Veshachas Anshe Domim U'Mirma L'Yachzu Yemeim V'Ani Eftach Bach. You hear it on Fenecha Adonai Elohai Kashem Shezatan V'Sayim V'Sechtas Pesachim. Kain Tazveinu L'Haskil V'Sechtas L'Swem Machperim L'Sayman L'Lum L'Lami L'Ishma L'Asul Kayim as Koldivi Sam Tosech B'Ava L'Schus Kol HaTanoim V'Amoroyim V'Tamid Chachamim Yam Li L'Zari Shlei Tomish Ta'Toyrim Pi U'Pi Zari Adalam T'Skaimbi V'Salecha Tancha Ischa V'Shach V'Tishmalecha V'Kitzoyse Hisichecha Kivi Yibu Yimecha V'Sivu Shastayim Orech Yom B'Mino V'Shmola Oishav Chavad Noi Oz Lan V'Teina Noi Berech Asam V'Shalom Rabbi, Yomod Wasim Charato L'Chayol Messiah, Usaka L'Chayol U'Beikato L'Shalem, U'Shachlolei Chol V'Gabal, U'Verkal U'Chon D'Chua Me'ara, L'Asmok U'Chon D'Shmai L'Asrei, V'Yam L'Chu Shebrechu, V'Chusei V'Korei V'Chayichov, V'Chon D'Chayil Chavei Tzisroel, Aglos Makarib Yirmuameh. Yes,
Mazel tov. Mazel tov. Mazel tov.
Mazel tov, Rabbi Sherm. Mazel
Mazel
tov.
tov.
Mazel tov. Mazel tov. Mazel tov. Mazel tov. Rabbi Sherm, Mazel tov. Mazel tov. Mazel tov. Mazel tov.
First Mishnah.
Mazel tov. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Echad ba'adar. Okay, just to begin the first Mishnah. Thank you, Mordechai. Thank you. Echad ba'adar, mashmiyan al ashkolim. Echad ba'adar, we're going to see the machrisim. We go ahead and call out ashkolim. That you should go collect the machzah shekel, as we're going to see. By the Klayim, they would pull out to go ahead and bring the Klayim in the fields of Achimshasa, or Korinus, the 50-day deal of the large cities that were walled before the Shubinun, the Sakinas, Adrachim, they would go ahead and the roads that have been corrupted in the window. Yes, Harachavas, the streets, the Mikvahs, they've taken mikvahs, the Hasidim, Hamayim, voicing called Sarchel Rabim, Simon, Es Hakfarais, for the Kahanim, Yaitz Mav Al Klayim, and we'll see this tomorrow. Okay. Okay. One second, I gotta hang up. Okay. I'm hanging up, okay?
Okay.
I'm hanging up.
Nice to see Mr. Rose's wife. How much?
Goody.
Yeah. I know.